Before you judge this case, listen closely. Because what happens in the next few moments will remind you that justice isn't just about the law. It's about understanding the person standing in front of it. Before I say anything else, I want everyone in this courtroom to take a moment and breathe. Because today isn't just about a ticket, it's about a life. The law gives me rules to follow, yes, but it also gives me something even more important, the responsibility to listen. I've read the report, I see the violation. On paper, the decision is simple. But people don't live on paper. You stood here today not making excuses, not blaming anyone, but taking responsibility. That matters. In this courtroom, character always matters. I see someone who's trying, someone who made a mistake, not a bad person, just a human one. And if we start punishing every mistake without understanding the story behind it, then justice becomes cold. And that's not justice at all. You showed respect, you showed honesty, and most importantly, you showed humility. Those qualities don't show up in police reports, but they show up right here. The purpose of this court is not to break people down, it's to help them stand back up. Because when someone walks out of here feeling heard, they walk out better than they came in. So today, instead of a fine, I'm giving you something else. A chance to keep doing the right thing. A chance to prove that this moment does not define you. Remember this, how you treat people when you have power says everything about who you are. Case dismissed. Good luck to you. I truly mean that. Compassion over punishment means recognizing that every person who stands before the court carries a story far larger than a single moment of error. The law may define the violation, but it does not define the human being. When compassion leads, justice becomes more than a mechanical response. It becomes a deliberate act of understanding. Punishment alone assumes that fear corrects behavior, but compassion understands that dignity changes people in ways fear never can. A fine can empty a wallet, but it cannot fill a conscience. A harsh sentence may silence a person for a moment, but it rarely teaches them why they should do better tomorrow. Compassion does not excuse wrongdoing, nor does it ignore responsibility. It looks directly at the mistake, and then looks deeper, asking how and why it happened. It considers whether the purpose of the court is being served by adding more weight to someone already struggling to stand. Many people arrive burdened by circumstances they did not choose: poverty, illness, grief, exhaustion, fear. These conditions do not appear in legal codes, yet they shape decisions every day. When punishment is automatic, it treats unequal situations as if they were the same, and fairness disappears quietly under the appearance of order. True compassion requires courage because it is easier to punish than to understand. Punishment follows a script. Compassion demands attention. It requires listening without interruption, observing without judgment, and remembering that authority is not diminished by kindness. In fact, authority gains credibility when it shows restraint. When people feel seen rather than condemned, they are more likely to respect the law instead of resenting it. Respect grows from fairness, and fairness grows from empathy. A courtroom is often the last place someone expects mercy. Many walk in prepared to defend themselves, ashamed, anxious, or defeated. When compassion enters that space, it changes the air. It lowers voices, softens shoulders, and reminds everyone present that justice is administered by human beings, not machines. This does not weaken the rule of law. It strengthens it by grounding it in shared values. Laws exist to protect society, but society is made of individuals, each with their own struggles and hopes. Punishment focuses on what went wrong. Compassion focuses on what can go right next. It asks whether the outcome will help this person become more responsible, more careful, more respectful of the rules that bind us together. Sometimes accountability means consequences, but consequences guided by compassion are measured, purposeful, and fair. They are not designed to humiliate or overwhelm. They are meant to correct without crushing, to teach without scarring. There is a difference between justice that is loud and justice that is effective. Loud justice makes an example of people. Effective justice helps people become better examples themselves. When someone leaves the courtroom feeling they were treated fairly, even if the decision was not in their favor, they carry that experience forward. They tell their families, their neighbors, their children that the system listened. That story spreads trust, and trust is the foundation of any functioning community. Compassion over punishment also recognizes that mistakes are often moments, not identities. A single lapse does not erase years of good conduct, responsibility, or effort. When the system labels people solely by their worst day, it limits their future and narrows its own moral vision. Compassion allows room for growth. It acknowledges that learning often comes from being corrected with respect rather than being struck with severity. The power to punish is immense, and with that power comes responsibility. Every decision sends a message not just to the person standing before the court, but to everyone watching. When punishment is excessive, the message is fear. When compassion is present, the message is accountability paired with humanity. That message tells people that the law is firm but fair, serious but not cruel, strong but not indifferent. Compassion also demands consistency of principle, not favoritism. It does not mean bending rules for some and not for others. It means applying judgment thoughtfully, considering context without prejudice. Two people may commit the same violation, yet their circumstances, intentions, and histories may differ greatly. Treating them exactly the same may appear equal, but it may not be just. Justice is not arithmetic, it is moral reasoning. In moments of compassion, the courtroom becomes a place of reflection rather than confrontation. Instead of asking how much to penalize, the question becomes how to guide. Instead of measuring punishment, the focus shifts to responsibility and future conduct. This approach does not undermine discipline, it reinforces it by aligning consequences with purpose. People are more likely to comply with rules they believe are enforced with fairness and understanding. Compassion reminds us that many people before the court are not hardened offenders but ordinary individuals who made poor decisions under pressure. They are parents, workers, caregivers, students, people juggling responsibilities that sometimes collide with the law. When punishment ignores these realities, it risks deepening the very problems it seeks to correct. Compassion seeks solutions that address behavior without ignoring humanity. Choosing compassion over punishment is not about being soft, it is about being wise. It understands that lasting change comes from insight, not intimidation. When someone understands why their actions mattered and feels respected while being held accountable, the lesson stays with them. It becomes internal rather than imposed. That internal change is what reduces repeat mistakes and strengthens communities. Every act of compassion in a courtroom affirms a simple truth. Justice is at its best when it remembers who it serves. It serves not only order, but people. It serves not only rules, but the values behind them. When compassion guides punishment rather than replacing accountability, the system fulfills its highest purpose by balancing firmness with mercy, structure with understanding, authority with humanity, and recognizing that sometimes the most powerful correction is not the heaviest penalty, but the moment when someone realizes they were treated fairly and expected to do better, and leaves carrying that responsibility forward into their life without feeling broken, unheard, or dismissed, but aware that their actions mattered and that they were given the chance to rise above a single mistake and choose differently next time, while understanding that the law watched, listened, and responded not with indifference, but with measured care that acknowledges consequences without forgetting the person standing there, still trying to find their footing in a world that does not always make room for error and growth at the same time. Listening before judging is the foundation of fair decision-making, because judgment formed without understanding is little more than assumption dressed in authority. When someone stands before the court, they arrive carrying nerves, fear, and often shame, knowing that a single moment may shape how they are seen and treated. In that moment, the simple act of listening becomes powerful. It tells the person that they are more than the accusation attached to their name. It creates space for truth to emerge, rather than forcing it into a narrow frame defined only by reports and records. Listening requires patience, and patience is not weakness. It is discipline. It means resisting the urge to interrupt, to rush, to conclude before the full picture is visible. Many misunderstandings are born from speed, not from malice. When authority listens carefully, it slows the process just enough to allow clarity. Details that would otherwise be lost come into focus, and motivations that were invisible become relevant. This does not excuse wrongdoing, but it explains it. An explanation is essential to proportionate judgment. A system that judges before listening teaches people to defend themselves rather than to be honest. When individuals feel unheard, they speak less truth and more protection. They choose words carefully not to explain, but to survive. Listening changes that dynamic. It encourages openness. When someone believes their words matter, they are more likely to take responsibility instead of hiding behind excuses. Accountability grows in an environment where people feel safe to tell the truth. Listening also acknowledges that official accounts, while important, are not complete reflections of human experience. Reports capture events, not emotions. They record actions, not pressures. They outline outcomes, not intentions. Listening allows the missing pieces to surface. It brings balance to a process that might otherwise rely too heavily on documentation and too lightly on humanity. Justice becomes more accurate when it includes both facts and voices. There is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is passive, listening is intentional. Listening means observing tone, pauses, and the things left unsaid. It means recognizing when someone is struggling to find words, when emotion interrupts logic, when fear shapes responses. These elements matter because they reveal the human reality behind the situation. Ignoring them leads to decisions that may be legally sound but morally incomplete. Listening before judging also protects the integrity of authority. When decisions appear rushed or predetermined, trust erodes. People begin to believe outcomes are inevitable, regardless of what they say. This perception damages respect for the system as a whole. On the other hand, when people witness a process where listening is genuine, even unfavorable decisions are more likely to be accepted. Acceptance is not agreement, but it is acknowledgement that the process was fair. Every person wants to be understood, especially in moments of vulnerability. The courtroom is one of the most vulnerable spaces a person can enter. Listening recognizes that vulnerability without exploiting it. It creates a sense of balance between power and fairness. Authority that listens does not lose control. It gains legitimacy. It demonstrates confidence in its ability to decide wisely rather than quickly. Listening also reduces error. Many unjust outcomes are not the result of cruelty, but of incomplete information. When listening is prioritized, mistakes are caught before they harden into consequences. Context emerges, contradictions are clarified, and assumptions are challenged. This leads to decisions that are not only fairer, but more precise. Precision in justice matters because every outcome affects real lives beyond the courtroom. Listening shapes how people leave the courtroom. Someone who feels ignored leaves angry or defeated. Someone who feels heard leaves reflective, even if the decision carries consequences. Reflection is where change begins. When individuals recognize that their actions were examined carefully and their words considered, they are more likely to internalize the lesson rather than reject it. This internalization is far more effective than fear-based compliance. Judgment without listening often relies on patterns rather than individuals. It categorizes people by offense, appearance, or past behavior. Listening disrupts those categories. It reveals nuance. It reminds decision makers that no two situations are identical, even when they look similar on the surface. This awareness guards against bias, both conscious and unconscious, by grounding decisions in specific realities rather than generalized expectations. Listening also models respect. When authority listens, it teaches everyone present how to treat one another. It sets a standard for civil discourse and mutual recognition. This example extends beyond the courtroom, influencing how people view conflict resolution in their own lives. Respectful listening encourages dialogue instead of division, understanding instead of assumption. The act of listening requires humility. It accepts that no single perspective holds all truth. It acknowledges that authority does not mean omniscience. This humility strengthens justice by making it adaptable rather than rigid. Rigid systems break under complexity. Adaptable systems respond to it. Listening is the tool that allows adaptation without sacrificing principle. Listening before judging also aligns decisions with purpose. The purpose of justice is not speed nor spectacle, but fairness and order. Speed without listening sacrifices accuracy. Spectacle without listening sacrifices dignity. Listening restores focus on outcomes that serve both individual accountability and public trust. It ensures that decisions are made with awareness of their impact, not just their legality. When listening is genuine, it changes the emotional tone of the room. Tension softens, defensiveness eases, communication becomes clearer. This environment allows reason to prevail over emotion for both the speaker and the listener. Clear communication leads to clearer understanding, which leads to decisions that feel grounded rather than arbitrary. Listening before judging is also an act of responsibility to the wider community. Every fair decision reinforces confidence in the system. Every moment of being heard becomes a story people carry with them. These stories shape public perception more powerfully than rules or procedures. When people believe the system listens, they are more likely to engage with it honestly and responsibly. In the end, listening is not a delay in justice, it is a requirement of it. Judgment formed without listening may be efficient, but efficiency is not fairness. Fairness requires time, attention, and presence. It requires the willingness to hear uncomfortable truths and complex explanations. Listening ensures that judgment is not merely imposed, but earned through understanding, ensuring that decisions reflect not only what happened, but why it happened, who was affected, and how accountability can be applied in a way that respects both the law and the human being standing before it, acknowledging that justice loses its meaning the moment it stops listening and becomes a one-sided declaration rather than a thoughtful response to real human circumstances unfolding in that moment. Justice with humanity begins with the understanding that the law is a tool, not a weapon. It exists to guide behavior, protect communities, and resolve conflict, but it was never meant to erase empathy from decision-making. When humanity is removed from justice, the process becomes mechanical, rigid, and disconnected from the very people it is meant to serve. Justice that forgets the human element may still follow rules, but it loses its moral center. Humanity restores balance by reminding decision-makers that every case involves a person whose life extends far beyond the moment being examined. Humanity and justice does not weaken authority, it defines it. Authority without humanity relies on fear to maintain order. Authority with humanity relies on respect. Respect is more durable than fear because it survives beyond the immediate consequence. When people feel they have been treated as human beings rather than case numbers, they are more likely to honor the system even when it holds them accountable. This respect becomes a quiet form of compliance that does not need constant enforcement. Justice with humanity recognizes that laws are written broadly, but lives are lived specifically. No statute can fully account for personal struggle, unexpected hardship, or the complex pressures that shape decisions. Humanity allows the law to be applied with awareness rather than blindness. It asks whether the outcome serves the purpose of justice or merely satisfies the appearance of it. This distinction matters because outcomes affect families, livelihoods, and futures in ways that cannot be undone once imposed. Humanity also demands fairness that is felt, not just measured. A decision can be legally correct, yet feel unjust if it ignores context. When people perceive justice as indifferent, they disengage from it emotionally and ethically. When justice acknowledges circumstances, listens to explanations, and weighs impact, it becomes something people can understand, even when it is difficult. Understanding reduces resentment, and reduced resentment strengthens social cohesion. Justice with humanity allows room for proportionality. Not every mistake requires the same response, and not every violation reflects the same intent. Humanity distinguishes between carelessness and contempt, between ignorance and disregard. This distinction is critical because punishment that ignores intent risks being excessive or misdirected. Proportional responses are more likely to correct behavior because they align consequences with responsibility rather than severity alone. Humanity also recognizes that shame is not a productive tool of justice. Public humiliation may satisfy a desire for retribution, but it rarely leads to improvement. Justice that preserves dignity encourages reflection rather than defensiveness. When people are not stripped of their dignity, they are more open to learning from their mistakes. Dignity does not eliminate accountability, it makes accountability meaningful. In a humane system, consequences are designed to teach rather than to simply penalize. Teaching requires understanding how people learn and change. Fear may produce short-term compliance, but it does not foster long-term responsibility. Humanity focuses on outcomes that encourage better choices in the future. This forward-looking approach benefits not only the individual, but the community as a whole by reducing repeated harm. Justice with humanity also acknowledges power dynamics. The courtroom is an uneven space where one side holds authority and the other often feels vulnerable. Humanity tempers that imbalance by ensuring that power is exercised with care. It prevents authority from becoming domination. When power is used responsibly, it reassures people that the system exists to serve, not to control. Humanity also involves consistency of compassion, not selective kindness. It requires treating people with respect, regardless of their background, appearance, or status. When humanity is applied unevenly, it loses credibility. True humane justice is impartial in its empathy, extending understanding without favoritism. This consistency reinforces trust because people believe they will be treated fairly, not arbitrarily. Justice with humanity understands that many individuals who appear before the court are already carrying heavy burdens. Financial stress, family responsibility, health issues, and social pressure often intersect in ways that lead to mistakes. Humanity does not ignore these factors. It considers them carefully. This consideration does not absolve responsibility, but it informs how responsibility is addressed. Humanity also allows justice to be restorative rather than purely punitive. Restorative approaches focus on repairing harm and reintegrating individuals into the community. This perspective sees people as capable of change rather than permanently defined by error. When justice supports restoration, it contributes to healing rather than perpetuating cycles of punishment. A humane approach also influences how justice is perceived by observers. People watching learn what values are being upheld. When humanity is visible, it communicates that the system values fairness, dignity, and reason. These values shape public trust more powerfully than strict enforcement alone. Trust encourages cooperation, and cooperation strengthens the effectiveness of the law. Justice with humanity requires emotional intelligence. It involves recognizing when firmness is necessary and when understanding will achieve more. Emotional intelligence allows decision-makers to respond appropriately to different situations rather than relying on a single rigid approach. This adaptability makes justice resilient in the face of complexity. Humanity also protects against dehumanization. When systems become overloaded or routine-driven, there is a risk of seeing people as problems to be processed. Humanity resists this tendency by insisting on individual recognition. Each case is treated as a unique interaction, not a repetitive task. This mindset preserves the ethical core of justice work. Justice with humanity aligns outcomes with values rather than impulses. It resists pressure to appear tough for the sake of image. It focuses instead on what is right and effective. This restraint requires confidence and integrity. It shows that justice does not need to prove its strength through severity. Humanity also encourages accountability that is internal rather than imposed. When people understand why a decision was made and feel respected in the process, they are more likely to accept responsibility sincerely. This acceptance leads to genuine change rather than compliance driven by fear of punishment. Justice with humanity ultimately reflects a belief in human potential. It operates on the assumption that most people want to do better when given the chance and the guidance. This belief shapes decisions that leave room for improvement rather than closing doors permanently. It recognizes that society benefits when individuals are supported in becoming more responsible rather than pushed further to the margins. In applying humanity, justice becomes a dialogue rather than a declaration. It listens, considers, and responds thoughtfully. This dialogue does not undermine authority, it enriches it. It transforms the courtroom from a place of mere judgment into a place of moral responsibility, where decisions acknowledge the weight they carry and the lives they affect, ensuring that the law remains firm but not cruel, structured but not rigid, principled but not detached, always mindful that behind every case is a human being capable of reflection, growth, and change, standing at a moment where the response they receive can either harden them or guide them toward understanding and responsibility in a way that echoes beyond the walls of the courtroom and into the choices they will continue to make as they move forward, carrying the lesson of how justice treated them in that moment.